The soft glow of golden lights filled the restaurant, making everything look warm and perfect. It was one of the most expensive places in the city, where people came not just for food, but to be seen. Every table was carefully placed, every detail designed to impress. Gentle music played in the background, just loud enough to cover private conversations. At one of the best tables near the window sat Adrian Vale. He looked exactly how people imagined a billionaire would look. Calm, confident, and completely in control. His suit was perfectly tailored, his watch subtle but clearly expensive. He didn't try too hard to stand out. He didn't need to. His presence alone drew attention. Across from him sat Lila. She was beautiful in a way that made people turn their heads twice. Her dress shimmered softly under the light, and she carried herself with confidence. She smiled often, but tonight her smile felt a little forced. Adrian barely noticed. He stirred his drink slowly, his eyes not fully focused on anything in front of him. Lila was talking about something, her latest shopping trip, a new designer she liked, but his responses were short, distracted. "That place I told you about," Lila said, leaning forward slightly. "They finally got the new collection in. You should come with me next time. You might actually enjoy it." "Maybe," Adrian replied without looking at her. Lila paused. She studied his face for a moment. "You're not listening, are you?" Adrian blinked, as if waking up. "I am." "You're not," she said softly, but there was a hint of irritation in her voice now. "You haven't been all evening." He finally looked at her properly. "It's been a long day." "That's what you always say." Her tone wasn't loud, but it carried weight. This wasn't the first time. Adrian leaned back in his chair, exhaling quietly. "I brought you here, didn't I?" Lila forced a small smile. "Yes, you did." But something about the moment felt off. Even the waiter, who approached their table with careful politeness, seemed to notice the tension. "Your dinner will be ready shortly," the waiter said. Adrian nodded without much interest. Lila picked up her glass, taking a small sip, her eyes drifting around the room. This place was filled with important people, business leaders, celebrities, couples trying to look important. It was the kind of place she loved, usually. But tonight, something felt different. Maybe it was Adrian. Maybe it was the way he seemed far away, like his body was here, but his mind wasn't. As she looked around, Adrian's gaze shifted too. At first, it was just a casual glance across the room. Something people do without thinking. But then his eyes stopped. His fingers froze around the glass. His breathing slowed. For a second, it felt like the entire world had gone quiet. Across the restaurant, near a corner table, sat a woman. She wasn't dressed as loudly as the others. Her outfit was simple, elegant, and calm. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. Yet there was something about her that made her stand out more than anyone else in the room. Her hair fell naturally over her shoulders. Her posture was straight, but relaxed. She looked peaceful, and she was smiling. Not the kind of smile people force in public. It was real, soft, warm. Adrian's chest tightened. He knew that smile. He hadn't seen it in years, but he would recognize it anywhere. Elena. The name hit him like a sudden wave. For a moment, he wasn't in the restaurant anymore. He wasn't sitting across from Lila. He wasn't a billionaire surrounded by luxury. He was somewhere else. Somewhere simpler. Somewhere he had buried a long time ago. "Adrian." Lila's voice pulled him back, but he didn't respond. He couldn't, because now he saw something else. Elena wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was a man, well-dressed, confident. The kind of man who didn't need to prove anything. He leaned slightly forward as he spoke, his expression calm but focused. And Elena listened to him with that same soft smile. Adrian's jaw tightened. Who was he? But before that question could settle, something else caught his attention. Something that made his entire body go still. Elena placed a hand gently on her stomach. It was a small movement, almost unnoticeable. But Adrian saw it. And suddenly, everything became clear. She was pregnant. The realization hit him harder than anything else. Pregnant. His grip on the glass tightened slightly. Lila noticed immediately. "What is it?" she asked, turning to follow his gaze. Adrian didn't answer. Lila looked across the room, her eyes scanning until they landed on Elena's table. She frowned slightly. "Do you know her?" she asked. Still no response. That was answer enough. Lila's expression changed. Curiosity mixing with something sharper. "Who is she?" Adrian finally spoke, his voice lower than before. "No one." But even he knew that wasn't true. Across the room, Elena laughed softly at something the man said. It wasn't loud, but Adrian heard it anyway. That sound. It brought back memories he didn't want to face. Late nights, quiet conversations, a life that once felt real, a life he had walked away from. Lila leaned closer, her eyes still fixed on Elena. "She doesn't look like no one." Adrian ignored her. His mind was racing now. How was she here? Why now? And most of all, whose child was she carrying? The thought came uninvited, but once it appeared, it refused to leave. He tried to push it away. It didn't make sense. Too much time had passed. Or had it? His thoughts became messy, tangled with memories he had kept locked away. Across the room, the man reached for Elena's hand. Adrian's stomach tightened. Elena didn't pull away. Instead, she let her fingers rest in his, her expression calm and comfortable. That was enough. Something inside Adrian shifted, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Not anger, not exactly. Something deeper, something sharper. "Adrian." Lila's voice was firmer now. He turned to her slowly. "Who is she?" she asked again. This time, there was no softness in her tone. Adrian hesitated, just for a second. Then he said, "Someone I used to know." Lila studied his face carefully. "You don't look at someone you used to know like that." He didn't respond, because he couldn't deny it. Across the room, Elena adjusted slightly in her seat. For a brief moment, her eyes moved, and then they met his. Time stopped. Her expression didn't change immediately, but there was a pause. A small, quiet pause. Recognition. Adrian felt it, even from across the room. The connection was still there, buried under years of silence. Elena didn't smile this time. She didn't look shocked either. She simply looked at him, calm, steady, as if she had already prepared for this moment long ago. Then, just as quietly, she looked away, like he was nothing more than a passing stranger. That hurt more than anything. Adrian's chest tightened again. Lila noticed everything. The look, the silence, the way Adrian couldn't take his eyes off her. And suddenly, Lila understood something she didn't like. "Is she the reason?" Lila asked quietly. Adrian frowned. "What?" "The reason you're never really here," she said, "even when you're sitting right in front of me." He didn't answer, because for the first time, he wasn't sure. The waiter returned with their food, placing the dishes carefully on the table. "Enjoy your meal," he said politely. Neither of them touched their plates. Adrian's focus remained across the room. On Elena, on the life she seemed to be living without him, and on the man sitting across from her. Lila slowly put her fork down. "I don't like this," she said. Adrian barely heard her, because at that moment, something inside him had already changed. The past he thought was gone had just walked back into his life. And it wasn't alone. Adrian didn't remember tasting a single bite of food in front of him. The plate sat untouched, the steam slowly fading into the air. Across from him, Lila had given up pretending. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, watching him with quiet frustration. But Adrian barely noticed her anymore. His attention kept drifting back. Back to that corner table. Back to Elena. She was still there, still sitting calmly as if nothing had changed. As if she hadn't just turned his entire world upside down by simply existing in the same room. The man with her was speaking again, and she listened closely, nodding once in a while. There was comfort between them. Not forced, not fake, real. Adrian felt something twist inside his chest. It didn't make sense. He had everything now, power, money, control, the kind of life people dreamed of. He had chosen this. He had worked for it. So why did that simple moment across the room feel heavier than all of it? "Are you going to sit here all night like this?" Lila's voice broke through again. Adrian blinked and finally looked at her. "What?" he asked, distracted. She let out a small, tired laugh. "You're not even trying to hide it anymore." "Hide what?" That you'd rather be over there, she said, her eyes sharp now. Adrian didn't respond right away, because she wasn't wrong. Lila shook her head slowly. You said she's someone you used to know. That's not how you look at someone from your past. Adrian's jaw tightened. Drop it. No, she said firmly. I won't. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried enough weight to make the people at the next table glance over for a second before quickly looking away. Lila leaned forward slightly. I've been with you long enough to know when something matters to you. And this, she glanced at Elena again, this clearly does. Adrian exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. For a moment, he looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from work, but something deeper. She's not part of my life anymore, he said. Then why does it look like she still is? Lila asked quietly. That question stayed in the air between them. Adrian didn't answer, because he didn't have one. His mind had already gone somewhere else. Back in time. Back to a version of himself that felt unfamiliar now. There was a time when things were simple. Before the money, before the pressure, before the endless need to prove something to the world. Back then, Adrian wasn't sitting in expensive restaurants or making deals worth millions. He was just a man trying to build something from nothing. And Elena, she had been there, not for the success, not for the image, but for him. He remembered the small apartment they used to share. It wasn't much, just a quiet place within walls and a window that barely let in sunlight, but she had filled it with warmth. She had a way of making even the simplest things feel enough. He remembered how she used to wait for him late at night, even when he came home exhausted and frustrated. She would sit beside him, listening as he talked about his plans, his ideas, his dreams. You're going to get there, she would say softly. And he believed her, not because the world believed in him, but because she did. Adrian swallowed hard, pulling himself back to the present. Across the room, Elena adjusted her seat again, her hand resting on her stomach for a moment. That sight brought everything crashing back. There was a night he couldn't forget. It had been raining heavily, the kind of rain that made the whole city feel quiet and distant. Adrian had just received an opportunity, a big one, the kind that could change everything. But it came with a condition. He had to leave, not just for a few days, for good, a different city, a different life, a chance to finally become the man he had always wanted to be. He remembered how excited he felt at first, and then how quiet Elena became when he told her. You're leaving? She had asked. It's not just leaving, he had said. It's a chance. Everything we talked about, it's finally happening. She looked at him for a long moment. And where do I fit in that? Adrian didn't have a clear answer. That was the problem. I'll figure it out, he had said. Once things are stable, I'll come back for you. But even as he said it, something didn't feel right. Elena had noticed. You're already gone, she said quietly. That's not true. Then why does it feel like I'm not part of your plan anymore? He didn't respond, because deep down he knew she was right. That night had changed everything. They argued, not loudly, not in anger, but in a way that hurt more. It wasn't about shouting. It was about distance. Two people slowly realizing they were no longer walking the same path. You're choosing this over us, she said. I'm choosing our future, he replied, but she shook her head. No, you're choosing your future. Those words stayed with him for years. In the end, he left. He told himself it was necessary, that he would come back, that nothing would really change. But life didn't work like that. Time passed. Calls became fewer. Messages became shorter. Until one day, there was nothing. She was gone. No explanation. No goodbye. Just silence. Adrian had told himself it didn't matter. He buried himself in work. He built everything he had now from that decision. And yet, sitting here, watching her across the room, it felt like none of that success meant anything in this moment. Adrian! Lila's voice pulled him back again. He looked at her. Her expression had softened slightly, but there was still something unsettled in her eyes. Were you in love with her? She asked. The question came so simply, but it hit harder than anything else. Adrian didn't answer right away. He looked down at the table, then back across the room. At Elena, at the life she had now, at the man sitting with her. Finally, he said quietly, "Yes." Lila nodded slowly, as if she had expected that. "And are you still?" she asked. That question was different, more dangerous. Adrian opened his mouth, but no words came out, because he didn't know. Or maybe he didn't want to admit it. Across the room, the man stood up for a moment, stepping away to take a phone call. Now Elena was alone. Adrian noticed immediately. Something inside him shifted again. An urge, a need to go over there, to ask questions, to understand, to finally get answers he never had. Lila saw the change in him. "You're thinking about going to her," she said. Adrian didn't deny it. "That's a bad idea," Lila added. "Maybe, not maybe, definitely." He looked at her, calm but distant. "I need to know." "Know what?" she asked. Adrian glanced toward Elena again. "Everything." Lila let out a quiet breath, shaking her head. "And what if you don't like the answers?" Adrian stood up slowly. His chair made a soft sound against the floor. "Then at least I'll have them," he said. Lila stared at him, disbelief clear on her face. "You're really doing this? Right now? While I'm sitting here?" Adrian paused for a second. For just a second. But it wasn't enough. Because the next moment, he turned away, leaving her at the table, and started walking across the restaurant. Each step felt heavier than it should have. People glanced at him as he passed. But he didn't notice. His focus was only on one place, one person. Elena looked up just as he reached the table. Their eyes met again. This time, there was no distance between them, no space to avoid what was real. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Years of silence stood between them. Then Adrian finally said, quietly, "Elena." Her name felt unfamiliar on his lips, but also not. Elena held his gaze. Calm, steady, almost unreadable. "Yes," she replied. Her voice was soft, but distant, like he was just another stranger speaking to her. And somehow, that hurt more than if she had been angry. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. The sound of the restaurant continued around them. Soft music, quiet conversations, the clinking of glasses. But at that table, everything felt still. Adrian stood there, unsure what to say next. Elena looked up at him calmly, her expression steady, almost too steady. There was no shock on her face, no visible anger, no warmth either, just a quiet kind of distance. It made him feel like a stranger. "You're here," Adrian finally said, though the words sounded pointless the moment they left his mouth. Elena gave a small nod. "I am." Another pause followed. Adrian glanced at the empty chair across from her, then back at her. "Can I sit?" Elena didn't answer right away. She looked at him for a moment, as if thinking carefully. Then she gave a small gesture toward the chair. "If you want." It wasn't an invitation. It wasn't rejection either. Just neutral. Adrian pulled a chair and sat down slowly. For the first time, he was close enough to see the small details. The faint tiredness in her eyes, the softness in her face that hadn't changed, and the quiet strength in the way she held herself. For a moment, he forgot everything he planned to ask. "You look different," he said. Elena gave a slight smile, but it didn't fully reach her eyes. People usually do after a few years. "That's not what I meant." "I know," she replied gently. Her hand rested on the table, and again, almost without thinking, she moved it to her stomach. It was a small, protective gesture. Adrian noticed. His eyes followed the movement. The question rose in his chest again, stronger this time. But before he could say anything, a voice came from behind him. "Everything okay here?" Adrian turned. The man had returned. He stood beside the table now, calm and composed, but his presence was firm. He looked at Adrian with quiet confidence, not aggressive, but not welcoming either. Elena looked up at him. "It's fine." The man's gaze shifted between the two of them. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said, a little more clearly this time. The man gave a small nod, then extended his hand toward Adrian. "I don't think we've met." Adrian stood up automatically and shook his hand. The grip was firm. "No, we haven't," Adrian said. "I'm Daniel." The man introduced himself. "Adrian." There was a brief moment where neither let go immediately. Not a challenge, but something close to it. Then they both released. Daniel pulled out his chair and sat beside Elena, not across from her this time. The small change didn't go unnoticed by Adrian. It was subtle, but it meant something. Daniel rested his arm lightly on the back of Elena's chair, his posture relaxed but protective. "So," Daniel said calmly, looking at Adrian, "how do you know Elena?" Before Adrian could answer, Elena spoke. "We go back a long time," she said simply. Daniel nodded slowly, taking that in. "I see." There was no judgment in his tone, but there was awareness. Adrian sat back down, feeling the shift in the atmosphere. This wasn't just about him and Elena anymore. It was something else now, something more complicated. "I didn't expect to see you here," Adrian said, looking at Elena again. "I could say the same," she replied. Her voice remained calm, but there was a quiet edge to it now. Adrian hesitated, then asked, "You been in the city long?" "A while." "And you didn't think to—" He stopped himself. "To what?" Elena asked. "To reach out." The words came out before he could soften them. Elena held his gaze. "For what reason?" she asked quietly. Adrian frowned slightly. "After everything, I thought that we would just continue where we left off," she finished for him. He didn't answer, because that wasn't exactly what he meant. But it also wasn't entirely wrong. Elena let out a soft breath, looking down for a second before meeting his eyes again. "Life doesn't work like that," she said. Daniel stayed silent, but he was listening closely. Adrian leaned forward slightly. "You disappeared." Elena's expression changed just a little. "I disappeared," she repeated. There was no anger in her voice, but there was disbelief. "Yes," Adrian said. "No calls. No messages. Nothing." Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "You left." The words landed heavier than anything he had said. Adrian opened his mouth, but she continued. "You made your choice," she said. "You didn't leave space for me in it." "That's not true," he said quickly. "I told you I would come back." "And how long was I supposed to wait?" she asked. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Adrian didn't have an answer, because back then he hadn't thought about that part. "I waited," Elena added softly. That caught him off guard. "For a while," she continued. "Longer than I should have." There was a quiet honesty in her words that made it hard to look away. Adrian felt something tighten in his chest again. Across from him, Daniel shifted slightly, but still said nothing. He was giving them space. But he wasn't disconnected. "I didn't know," Adrian said. Elena gave a small, almost sad smile. "You didn't ask." That silence returned again. He couldn't argue with that, because it was true. Work had taken over his life. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. And somewhere along the way, he stopped trying, stopped calling, stopped showing up, until there was nothing left. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, clearly unsettled now. "I thought you moved on," he admitted. "I did," Elena said simply. Her answer was calm, clear, final. Adrian's eyes flickered at Daniel for a brief second, then back to her. "With him?" he asked. Elena followed his glance, but didn't react much. "Daniel has been there when it mattered," she said. Daniel looked at her, a soft understanding in his expression. Adrian noticed that, and something about it didn't sit well with him, not because of jealousy alone, but because of what it meant. Daniel had been there when he wasn't. Adrian leaned back slightly, trying to process everything. His eyes moved again, almost without control, to Elena's stomach. He couldn't ignore it anymore. The question had been building since the moment he saw her. Now it was impossible to hold back. "How far along are you?" he asked. The table went quiet. Daniel's expression changed slightly. Not angry, but alert. Elena didn't respond immediately. Her hand rested gently over her stomach again. Then she looked at Adrian. "Far enough," she said. It wasn't the answer he wanted. Adrian frowned. "That's not what I meant." "I know," she replied. "Then what do you mean?" he asked. Elena's gaze stayed steady. "It means I'm okay," she said. "That's not what I asked." "I know," she repeated. There was something in her tone now, a boundary, a quiet line she wasn't willing to let him cross. Adrian felt it, and it frustrated him, because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't in control of the conversation. Daniel finally spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "I think that's enough for now." Adrian looked at him. "This doesn't concern you," Adrian said. Daniel didn't react to the tone. "It does," he said simply. That was all, but it carried weight. Adrian held his gaze for a moment, then looked back at Elena. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her silence said enough. Adrian slowly stood up. This wasn't over. Not for him. There were too many unanswered questions. Too many things that didn't make sense. And one thought that refused to leave his mind. The timing. The distance. The silence. He looked at Elena one last time. "We're not done talking," he said quietly. Elena met his eyes, her expression calm, but firm. "We are for tonight." Adrian stood there for a second longer, then finally turned away. As he walked back toward his table, his thoughts were louder than ever, because deep down, a question had already taken root, and it wasn't going anywhere. Was the child his? Adrian didn't remember how he got back to his table. The walk felt longer than it should have, even though it was only a few steps. His mind was too loud, filled with questions that refused to settle. Every word Elena had said kept repeating in his head. "You didn't ask." "I waited." "I moved on." Each one stayed with him. When he finally reached his seat, Lila was still there, but she wasn't looking at him. Her plate had been pushed aside, untouched, just like his. She was slowly turning her glass in her hand, watching the light reflect through it. "You look like you saw a ghost," she said without looking up. Adrian didn't reply. He sat down, but his body felt restless, like he couldn't stay still. "Well," Lila asked, finally raising her eyes to him, "was it worth it?" Adrian exhaled quietly. "I don't know." "That bad," she said. "That complicated." Lila studied him for a moment. "She's not just someone from your past, is she?" Adrian leaned back, staring at the table. "No." Lila gave a small, humorless smile. "I figured." There was a short silence. Then she asked, "Do you still love her?" Adrian closed his eyes for a second. It was the same question as before, but now it felt heavier, because now he had seen her. He had heard her voice again. He had felt that distance. "I don't know," he said honestly. Lila nodded slowly, like she had already expected that answer. "That's worse," she said quietly. Adrian looked at her, confused. "Worse than what?" "Worse than still loving her," she replied. At least that would be clear. Her words settled between them. Adrian didn't respond, because clarity was exactly what he didn't have right now. Across the room, he could still see Elena and Daniel sitting together. They were talking again, as if nothing had happened, as if that entire moment meant nothing. But it meant everything to him. "I'm leaving," Lila said suddenly. Adrian looked at her. "What?" "I said I'm leaving," she repeated, this time more clearly. He frowned. "Why?" Lila let out a quiet breath, almost like she was tired of explaining something that should have been obvious. "Because I'm not going to sit here and pretend this is normal," she said. "You're not here with me. You haven't been all night." Adrian straightened slightly. "Lila." "No." She cut him off gently but firmly. "Don't try to fix it now." She picked up her bag, her movements calm but final. "This isn't about her," she added. "It's about you." Adrian watched her, not fully understanding. "You don't know what you want," she said, "and I'm not going to wait around while you figure it out." There was no anger in her voice, just honesty, and maybe a little disappointment. Adrian didn't stop her. He could have, but something inside him knew she was right. Lila gave him one last look. "When you do figure it out, just make sure you don't hurt more people in the process." Then she turned and walked away. Adrian stayed where he was, alone now, but not really, because his mind was still across the room. After a few minutes, he stood up again. This time, he didn't hesitate. He wasn't going back to his table. He wasn't leaving the restaurant. He was going outside. He needed air. The cool night breeze hit his face as soon as he stepped out. The noise of the city was softer here, distant but steady. Cars passed by, lights moving in quiet lines. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, trying to clear his thoughts. But it didn't work. Nothing was clear. Everything felt unfinished. And one thing kept pulling at him. The conversation wasn't over. Not really. A few minutes passed. Then the restaurant door opened again. Adrian turned slightly. It was Elena. She stepped outside slowly, her arms wrapped lightly around herself, as if adjusting to the cool air. For a moment, she didn't notice him. Then she did. Their eyes met again. This time, there was no crowd, no distractions, just the two of them. Elena paused. Adrian didn't move. Neither of them spoke at first. Then Elena walked a little closer, stopping a few steps away from him. "I thought you left," she said. "I could say the same," he replied. She gave a small nod. "Daniel is paying the bill." Adrian noticed she said his name naturally, like it belonged in her life. That detail didn't go unnoticed. There was a short silence. The night air felt heavier now. Adrian looked at her again, more carefully this time. "You seem different," he said. Elena smiled faintly. "People keep saying that tonight. I mean it in a good way." "I know," she said softly. Her expression relaxed just a little, but the distance was still there. Adrian took a small step closer. "Elena, we need to talk." She looked at him steadily. "We already did." "No," he said. "Not really." She didn't respond. He continued, his voice quieter now. "There are things I don't understand." Elena looked away for a moment, then back at him. "Not everything needs to be understood," she said. "It does for me." Her eyes softened just a little. "That's part of the problem," she replied. Adrian frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means you always needed answers for everything," she said, "even when there weren't any simple ones." "That's not fair." "It's true," she said calmly. Her honesty didn't feel like an attack. It felt like a fact. Adrian looked down briefly, then back at her. "Is it his?" he asked suddenly. The question came out before he could stop it. Elena didn't react immediately, but something in her expression changed. Not anger, not shock, just stillness. "Does it matter?" she asked. Adrian stared at her. "Of course it matters." "Why?" she asked. "Because," he stopped. "Because what? Because he needed to know? Because it could change everything? Because he wasn't ready to accept that it might not be his?" He didn't have a clear answer. Elena watched him struggle for a moment. Then she said quietly, "You don't get to ask that like you were there." The words hit hard. Adrian felt it. "I'm asking now," he said. "That doesn't change the past." "I know," he admitted, "but it might change the future." Elena's eyes searched his face, trying to understand what he meant. "And what exactly are you thinking?" she asked. Adrian hesitated. Then he said, "The timing, it doesn't feel right." Elena let out a slow breath. "So that's what this is about," she said. "What does that mean?" "It means you've already done the math in your head," she replied. "And now you're here looking for confirmation." Adrian didn't deny it, because she was right. Elena looked away for a moment, her hand resting on her stomach again. There was something protective in that gesture, something firm. When she looked back at him, her expression was different now, stronger. "You don't get to come back into my life after all this time and ask questions like that," she said. Her voice was still calm, but there was no softness left. Adrian took a step closer. "If there's even a chance." "There is no chance conversation right now," she cut in. That stopped him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension between them was quiet, but heavy. Finally, Elena said, more gently this time, "You made your choice back then. I had to live with it." Adrian looked at her, really looked this time, at the strength in her, at the calm she carried, at the life she had built without him. "I didn't think it would turn out like this," he said. Elena gave a small, almost sad smile. "Life rarely does." The restaurant door opened again. Daniel stepped out, looking around until his eyes landed on them. He walked over, stopping beside Elena. "Everything okay?" he asked softly. Elena nodded. "Yes." Daniel glanced at Adrian, then back at her. "We should go," he said. Elena hesitated for a second, then nodded again. As they turned to leave, Adrian spoke one last time. Elena. She stopped, but didn't turn around immediately. I'm not done, he said. She stood still for a moment, then slowly looked back at him, her expression calm, but final. I am, she said, and with that, she walked away. Daniel followed beside her. Adrian stood there, watching them disappear into the night, and for the first time in years, he felt like he had lost something real, all over again. Adrian didn't go back inside. He stood on the sidewalk long after Elena and Daniel had left, staring at the empty road as if something might bring them back. The night felt quieter now, colder somehow. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel in control. Usually, when something didn't go his way, he found a solution. He made calls, arranged meetings, fixed problems before they grew bigger. But this wasn't something he could fix with money or power. This was personal, and he had no idea what to do. After a while, his driver pulled the car up near the entrance. Adrian didn't move at first. The driver stepped out and opened the door, waiting respectfully. Sir, he said gently. Adrian nodded and got into the car without a word. The ride back felt longer than usual. The city lights passed by, but he didn't pay attention to them. His mind kept going back to Elena, her calm voice, her steady eyes, the way she had said, "You made your choice." He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. Maybe she was right. No, she was right. He had made that choice. And now, he was standing in the consequences of it. When he reached his penthouse, everything was exactly as he had left it. Clean, quiet, perfect, too perfect. The silence inside felt heavier than the noise outside. He loosened his tie and walked slowly into the living room. The large windows showed the city below, glowing in the distance. It was the kind of view people dreamed of, but tonight it didn't feel like much. He poured himself a drink, then paused. He stared at the glass for a second and set it back down untouched. For some reason, it didn't feel right. Instead, he sat down, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to think about everything he had avoided. The late nights when Elena waited for him. The way she believed in him when no one else did. The look on her face the night he told her he was leaving. He had told himself it was necessary, that success required sacrifice. But now, sitting alone in a quiet room that felt too big, he started to question that. What had he really gained? And what had he lost? The next morning came too quickly. Adrian barely slept. He stood by the window as the sun slowly rose, painting the sky in soft colors. The city came back to life, people moving, cars filling the streets. Life continued, but his thoughts were still stuck on last night. He needed answers, not just guesses or assumptions, real answers. And this time, he wasn't going to walk away without them. A few hours later, Adrian sat in his office. His assistant stood across from him, holding a tablet. "You asked me to find information about someone?" she said. Adrian nodded. "Yes." He hesitated for a second, then said, "Elena." His assistant typed quickly, scanning through records. There are several with that name. Adrian gave a small, impatient exhale. "I'll send you the details." He did. Within minutes, she found the right one. "She's been working with a healthcare foundation for the past 2 years," the assistant said. "Mostly community projects." Adrian listened carefully. That sounded like her. "She keeps a low profile," the assistant added. "No major public presence." "What about Daniel?" Adrian asked. The assistant nodded. "Daniel is a CEO, runs a growing company, well-respected, no scandals." Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. "Are they married?" he asked. "No," the assistant replied. "No official record of that." Adrian leaned back in his chair. "Not married." That didn't mean much, but it was something. "Anything else?" he asked. The assistant hesitated for a moment. "She moved back to the city about 8 months ago," she said. Adrian's eyes sharpened. 8 months. The number stayed in his mind. It matched too closely with what he had been thinking. "Thank you," he said. The assistant nodded and left the room. Adrian sat there, alone again. 8 months. The thought returned stronger now. He stood up suddenly, grabbing his coat. He couldn't sit here and think anymore. He needed to see her. Later that day, Adrian found himself standing outside the building where Elena worked. It wasn't a fancy place. Simple, quiet. People walked in and out, focused on their work. He watched for a moment, unsure what he would say when he saw her. This wasn't like a business meeting. There was no script, no control. After a few minutes, he saw her. Elena stepped out of the building, holding a small file in her hands. She looked the same as last night, calm, composed. But when she saw him standing there, she stopped. There was a brief pause. Then she walked toward him. "You're here," she said. Her voice wasn't surprised, just tired. "I needed to see you," Adrian replied. Elena sighed softly. "Adrian, please," he said. "Just a few minutes." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay." They moved a little to the side, away from the entrance. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Adrian said, "I know I don't have the right to ask for anything." Elena crossed her arms lightly, listening. "But I need be honest now," he continued. "I should have been honest back then." She didn't interrupt. "I was scared," he admitted. "Not of failing, but of staying the same. I thought if I didn't take that chance, I'd regret it forever." Elena's expression softened slightly. But in doing that, he said, "I didn't realize I might lose something I couldn't replace." There was silence again. Elena looked down for a moment, then back at him. "I didn't come here for an apology," she said. "I know," he replied, "but you deserve one." She didn't argue, because she knew that was true. Adrian took a small breath. "And about the baby," he said carefully. Elena's expression changed again, more guarded now. "I'm not asking to take over anything," he added quickly. "I just need to know the truth." She looked at him for a long time, long enough for the moment to feel heavy. Then she said quietly, "It's yours." The world seemed to go silent. Adrian didn't move, didn't speak. For a second, it felt like he hadn't heard her correctly. "What?" he asked, almost under his breath. Elena held his gaze. "The child is yours," she repeated. Adrian's heart started beating faster. Everything he had been thinking, it was real. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to process it. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. Elena's eyes didn't waver. "Because you weren't there," she said. The answer was simple and painful. "I didn't know how to reach you anymore," she continued. "And even if I did, I didn't know if you would come back." Adrian felt the weight of those words. "I would have," he said. Elena gave a small, sad smile. "Maybe," she said, "but I couldn't build my life on maybe." That made sense. It hurt, but it made sense. Adrian looked down for a moment, then back at her. "I want to be part of this," he said. Elena didn't respond immediately. "I'm not saying I deserve it," he added, "but I want to try. If you'll let me." Elena studied his face carefully, as if trying to see if he meant it. "If you walk in now," she said slowly, "you don't get to walk out again." "I know." "This isn't about you anymore," she added. "It's about the child." "I understand." Another silence. Then Elena nodded slightly. "We take it slow," she said. "No promises, just actions." Adrian felt something shift inside him. Relief, but also responsibility. "That's fair," he said. At that moment, a car pulled up nearby. Daniel stepped out. He looked at both of them, his expression calm, but aware. Elena turned to him. "We were just talking." Daniel nodded, then looked at Adrian. There was no anger in his eyes, just a quiet seriousness. "Take care of what matters this time," Daniel said. Adrian met his gaze. "I will." Daniel didn't say anything else. He trusted Elena to make her own choices, and that was enough. Elena turned back to Adrian. "This doesn't fix the past," she said. "I know, but it can shape what comes next." Adrian nodded. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about control, or power, or success, just responsibility, and maybe a second chance. As Elena walked away with Daniel, Adrian didn't feel like he had lost everything anymore. For the first time, it felt like something real had just begun.